It's no secret that Trump is a big fan of crypto. The president even has his own meme coin. And his two eldest sons, Eric and Don Jr., are involved in a variety of crypto ventures. So the crypto community saw the benefits to having the West Wing on their side, so much so that they started pumping money into Trump's campaign and a number of GOP races as well. That flood of funding was one of the biggest breaks for the Trump campaign. But our next guest writes that the Trump crypto honeymoon is over. Joining us now, senior writer and author of the Inner Loop newsletter for Wired, Jake LaHutte. Jake, good to see you. Tell us why the crypto community is annoyed with Trump.
So I think a lot of it really depends on your bigger players versus the kind of, wide array of sort of sub niches in the crypto world. But when it comes to some of these big players like Coinbase and Andreessen Horowitz, they have really close ties with the Trump administration. There's a lot of money to be made with the future legislation coming down the pike here in Congress, not necessarily with that Genius Act that just passed. So the tensions bubbling up that I reported on here came in the buildup to that Genius Act, where they wanted to merge it with this much more ambitious bill on market structure. And they were the only firms that were in favor of doing this before kind of falling in line. But what was interesting was the fight wasn't even necessarily about crypto policy or ideology or anything like that, but more about kind of how to do things the White House's way in Trump 2.0 and kind of how to fall in line the right way.
So what does it mean if this relationship goes south?
Well, a lot of money at stake, certainly for the midterms and those bigger PACs that would want to support, your down ballot House candidates. But then I think the bigger question is in 2028, J.D. Vance would, along with, I think, the rest of the big donor community in Silicon Valley, kind of be in pole position to receive most of that support. But it's not clear yet how much this sort of short-term donor fatigue that I'm hearing about may apply to either of those cycles where, these are a lot of newcomers to politics and they kind of expect a quicker return on investment than they may have been getting. But there's so much money that could be made in this market structure bill that, it's not like a full-on we're leaving the Republican Party quite yet. It could be an opportunity for Democrats. But, with those bigger forces that'll come into the picture with market structure, especially what these folks call TradFi or traditional finance, your JP Morgans, your big institutions like that. Those bigger interests coming into play in this negotiation could make it even more tense, and that could lead to even more, of a visible break here.
TradFi. I'm learning every day from you, Jake. You got like a really kind of crazy quote from a senior administration official who says, "Welcome to Congress. You're just one of many who's been chewed up and spit out." What does that mean?
So I think there's essentially a couple things happening here. One is the Trump administration has a really low level of tolerance for the bipartisanship beyond maybe the minimal amount of Democratic support you would need to move something through the Senate or through committee. The other, though, is kind of a, welcome to the club moment for crypto where, you have to often spread your bets across both parties. You're going to take flack from the party in power. And, what I report in this story from a couple Republicans familiar with this, including a senior administration official, was kind of a sit down the White House had ahead of these negotiations where they're like, hey, this is how we're going to do it. The Democrats are not going to help you at all when you get back into power. That involved some language I can't share on your airwaves. But this is the kind of thing where ultimately this was very beneficial for both sides during the campaign. But now that you're in power and there are the realities of hashing out legislation, especially once we get to, like I mentioned earlier, those institutional players, you have to learn how to not just, take a compromise, but also get pushed around a fair amount. And we have a source in the crypto donor community who says, that's part of what you're signing up for in the system is you get sort of pushed around by everybody in Washington.
So what will the political and economic impact be if these crypto companies don't get what they're expecting from the Trump administration? What kind of power do they actually yield, aside from maybe the purse? I guess that's it, right?
Well, yeah, that was what I found really interesting about their donations during the campaign was these were not actually focused on the issue of the blockchain or using these digital assets more broadly in any sense. So it really is, as one of these sources described it to me, kind of a political football where there's a huge role for it on the campaign donor front. I also think that this is just clearly their shot and their window to get not only this regulation, but also, frankly, a boost in the price of a lot of these coins, currencies, and various other digital assets that the signal of this broader legislation coming down would allow you to get. So therefore, you can sell your holdings in these companies. And then at that point, a lot of the bigger holders, it's not really their problem how the actual regulation itself goes once they've sort of been able to, get that cash out.
I know you'll keep an eye on it. Jake LaHutte, thank you so much.